Early in the morning of July 8th, an 16-year-old girl was found lying naked on the railway tracks near the CHAD station. She was only wearing socks, and her entire body was covered in severe burns, so much so that even the grass beneath her was smoldering and smoking. The victim was taken to the hospital, where she managed to name the person responsible for what had happened. The story of a smart, beautiful, and well-mannered girl getting involved with a troublemaker is as old as time. Usually such relationships end when emotions give way to reality. However, unfortunately, it doesn't always end well. Before we begin, let me quickly remind you to like this video. Not for the horrible story, but for my work on this video and to help spread awareness about such cases. In part, thanks to you and me, law enforcement and the public pay attention to these matters. Any comment you leave will also help promote this video. Let's move to the Perm Krai, to the town of Oktyabrski, located 300 kilometers from Perm. This place does not have well-developed infrastructure. Young people have little to do, so one of their main pastimes is alcohol. Yaroslava Shikova was born on July 24, 2006, in Oktyabrski, Perm Krai. Local residents knew and respected her family. Yaroslava's mother, Elena, still works as a kindergarten teacher, while her father, Nikolai, teaches at the regional polytechnic college in a neighboring city. Nikolai Shikhov was strict but deeply loved his daughter, just as he cared for his students. Yaroslava was the second and youngest child in the family. Her mother, naturally, was softer on her and allowed her more freedom, but she also adored her. Even though the Shikhovs were not wealthy, they always paid great attention to their children's upbringing. As a result, both their son and daughter grew up polite, kind, and well-educated. Yaroslava stood out visually, like a little dandelion girl. Nowadays, many teenagers wear baggy clothes and slouch, but she always walked with a straight posture and a graceful gait. She always greeted people with a smile, say the family's neighbors. She was a good student, read a lot, and actively participated in school activities. Her classmates described her as someone you could always talk to and have fun with. There are people who are just easy and pleasant to talk to. They know how to listen and support you if needed. Yaroslava was exactly that. Non-confrontational, kind, and compassionate, said one of her acquaintances. She was always a homebody, preferring to spend time reading books. If she did go out, it was only with close friends, other responsible students like herself. Like any girl, Yaroslava cared about her appearance. Almost all the money her parents gave her was spent on cosmetics, and her desk was covered with beauty products. However, at 16, Yaroslava's life began to change. New people, parties, and alcohol appeared in her world. She carefully hid this bad habit, and even her parents did not suspect that she was drinking. At the beginning of 2023, the 10th grader tried to start a relationship with a local troublemaker, Sergey, who was the same age as her. It seemed that teenage rebellion had kicked in. She was drawn to the wrong crowd. At that age, girls often like cool guys and don't seek out normal, stable relationships, said one resident of Oktyabrski. Yaroslava and Sergey had known each other since childhood because their families lived just a few hundred meters apart. Although they were the same age and studied in parallel classes, they had hardly interacted before 2023. Sergey grew up in a wealthy family. His father, Radik Menyazev, had served in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and after retiring, got a job in Gazprom's security service. His mother, Irina, held a high position in the Federal Penitentiary Service for many years, and his older sister was a certified lawyer. Like the Shikhovs, the Menyazevs were well known in Oktyabrski, but not in a good way. Locals whispered that their wealth didn't come solely from their jobs. They went on vacation 2 or 3 times a year, built a huge house, bought a fleet of foreign cars, and sent their daughter to an expensive university on a paid program. Think about how much money that takes. I don't think those rumors about them came out of nowhere, said one local. If Sergey's parents tried to raise him, they did it terribly. Locals described him as a spoiled brat. As a child, Sergey practiced karate, and when he got older, he started using his skills on his classmates. Things worsened when he surrounded himself with a gang of troublemakers. They drank, fought, and caused disturbances together. Once, a neighbor scolded them and threatened to call the police. Sergey responded, "Call them, I don't care. You know who I am." Radik and Irina ignored complaints about their son from both residents and school officials. They continued to shower him with expensive gifts, like the latest iPhone and designer clothes. Interestingly, while Sergey tried to maintain the image of a tough guy, his friends described him differently. They said he wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. He was selective with friendships, cowardly, and weak-willed. He often cried when he couldn't fight back. He always sought approval from authority figures and tried to be the favorite. Maybe Yaroslava knew about this side of him, but being in love, she refused to listen to her friends who told her to find a decent guy. They were completely different people, and at that time, Sergey was still dating another girl, Alina. Yaroslava ignored the rumors. In the spring of 2023, she started flirting with Sergey, constantly hinting that he should break up with Alina and get closer to her. Sergey was flattered and bragged to his friends that such a beautiful girl was chasing him. That might have been why he didn't hurry to break up with Alina. Eventually, Alina found out about Yaroslava and broke up with Sergey on July 7, 2023. Sergey didn't seem upset. That evening, he invited two friends, Tigran Tovmasyan and Ilya Merzlyakov, to celebrate his breakup. The three of them gathered at the Menyazev's house while his parents were away. Sergey took homemade moonshine from his father's stash, and they started drinking. At some point, they got bored, and Sergey decided to invite Yaroslava. Around midnight, he texted her, saying he had broken up with Alina and inviting her over. Her family was already asleep, but Yaroslava was still awake. Seeing Sergey's message, she was thrilled. She couldn't miss this opportunity. She quietly got dressed, climbed out of her bedroom window, and headed to Sergey's house. What happened next remains a mystery. We were about to leave and offered to walk Yaroslava home, but she said she wanted to stay with Sergey. We didn't insist, friends later recounted. However, what happened next remains a mystery to the public. Sergey told one version of the story, but investigators believe the events unfolded differently. I met her on the street. We went to my place and started drinking moonshine. I didn't drink myself. I only pretended to, pouring myself water. I didn't drink because I knew my parents were coming in the morning and would realize if I had been drunk. After that, we lay down on the bed in my room and we had sexual intercourse. Then, Yaroslava got dressed and asked for more alcohol. She continued drinking. We wanted to have sex again and started undressing each other. Yaroslava started feeling unwell and asked to be taken outside, Sergey claimed. He said that the girl went outside wearing only socks. He tried to dress her but couldn't. Allegedly, she then decided to go to her friend's place. I offered to go with her. When we stepped outside, she said she would go to her friend's place via the railway tracks. I couldn't let her go alone, Sergey continued. According to him, when they started crossing the railway tracks, the girl fell and hit her head on the rails. Sergey saw blood running from her head and got scared. He approached her and checked for a pulse. There was none. She wasn't speaking or showing any signs of life. The young man began dragging her off the rails onto the embankment so she wouldn't be run over by a train. I tried to lift her, but she didn't react or move. I thought she was dead. Fear overwhelmed me. I hadn't done anything to her, but I would be blamed for everything. My fingerprints and other traces were left on her, Sergey told law enforcement. According to the teenager, he panicked and left, leaving the girl lying there. He returned home, started his motorcycle, and rode toward the pond to clear his mind. He rode for about half an hour. Later, Sergey, fearing that his traces would be found on Yaroslava, doused her in gasoline and set her on fire. She caught fire. There was no sound, no movement. After that, I went to the garbage bins, where I threw away Yaroslava's belongings and smashed her phone against the concrete floor with a rock, so that no traces of her presence with me remained. I did not hit Yaroslava on the head. I did not want to kill her, the young man justified himself. Be that as it may, early in the morning of July 8th, the driver of a train passing through the Chad station in the settlement of Oktyabrski saw a girl lying next to the railway tracks. The grass around her was still smoldering, and the only clothing she had on were socks. The driver immediately called an ambulance, which arrived at the scene within 10 minutes. However, an entire fragment of the girl's memory had been erased. According to interrogation materials from the medical worker, Yaroslava was lying on the railway tracks with her legs tucked under her and her eyes closed. The medic approached her and asked, "Who are you?" Yaroslava opened her eyes. "Did you fall out of a train?" "No." "Did someone bring or lead you here?" "I don't know." "How did you get here, and why are you naked?" "I don't know." "What is your name?" "Yaroslava." Then, the girl was asked who her parents were and where she lived. She answered correctly to all. Yaroslava remembered nothing from the moment she arrived at Sergey's house until she found herself on the tracks. However, she was able to recall 3 names: Sergey, Tigran, and Ilya. The victim, in critical condition, was hospitalized and later transferred to a regional clinic. Police, after hearing the names and surnames given by the victim, immediately went to their addresses. But inconsistencies arose that caught the investigators' attention. The expert found 12 wounds on Yaroslava's head. Where could they have come from if Sergey claimed he didn't hit the girl? His version was that she was injured when falling onto the rails and sleepers and when he dragged her onto the embankment. However, the medical report stated that the injuries were caused by blunt force trauma. The injuries could have been inflicted by blows from one or multiple stones with properties of a hard, blunt object, featuring sections with pronounced edges and corners. Another detail: the first person to notice Yaroslava was the driver of a passing train, who stated that the girl was conscious and sitting on the ground. He did not see any burns on her body. But 15 minutes later, when another train passed, its driver witnessed a horrific scene. The girl was on fire. The conclusion is obvious. The perpetrator could not have failed to realize that he was setting fire to a living person. In the hospital, doctors did everything possible to save the girl's life. However, unfortunately, a miracle did not happen. Yaroslava was urgently taken to the Oktyabrskaya Central Regional Hospital, and 2 days later, airlifted by medical aviation to the Perm Burn Center with 85% of her body covered in burns. For 10 days, the best burn specialists in the city, consulting with experts from federal burn centers, fought for her life. But on July 18, 2023, 6 days before her 17th birthday, the girl passed away. From the beginning of Sergey's testimony, the police had doubts. And when the forensic expert's report was completed, suspicions only intensified. According to the findings, the girl was subjected to sexual assault, and the injuries she sustained could not have been caused by a fall from a human height level. The investigation's version differs from the defense's narrative. According to investigators, Sergey himself persuaded the girl to come to his house, got her drunk, and assaulted her. The young man forced the victim to drink a strong alcoholic beverage, leading to a state of intoxication that deprived her of the ability to understand the nature and significance of what was happening to her and to resist. In other words, rendering her helpless, as stated in the criminal case materials. After the assault, Yaroslava ran out of the house naked and headed toward the railway tracks. Afraid that she might meet someone and tell them what had happened, Sergey decided to get rid of her. He caught up with the girl on the railway tracks and struck her on the head with a rock 12 times. The victim lost consciousness, and the perpetrator, believing she was dead, went home. Sometime later, he returned to the crime scene and saw that Yaroslava was still alive. She was conscious and sitting on the embankment. Realizing that the victim was in a helpless state and unable to resist, and fully aware that burning her alive would cause extreme physical pain, moral suffering, and an agonizing death, he poured a flammable liquid on her back and set her on fire before fleeing the scene. Sergey's guilt was proven, as experts found his DNA at the crime scene. Fire did not destroy everything. Moreover, he admitted that he had attempted to eliminate evidence. The police then thoroughly investigated Sergey's friends, Tigran Tovmasyan and Ilya Merzlyakov. Unlike Sergey, they agreed to take a polygraph test. Additionally, both had alibis, which excluded them from the list of suspects. The investigation into the case of Yaroslava Shikova lasted 6 months and was completed in December 2023. As a result, 3 charges were brought against Sergey. Had he been an adult, he could have faced up to 20 years in prison. However, under Russian law, he could not be sentenced to more than 10 years in prison. The same was the case with the murder of 16-year-old Karina Zalesova by her 16-year-old acquaintance Mark Konkov. After the brutal murder, the teenager was sentenced to 9 years in prison in 2016. Last December, he was released. But back to our story. The defense attorneys of the accused disagreed with the investigation's claim that Sergey had rendered Yaroslava helpless. According to them, in such a state, it would have been impossible for her to record a video that she sent to her friend just hours before the tragedy. The girl had indeed recorded 3 short video messages. 2 lasted only a few seconds, while the third was about 20 seconds long. In the first 2 videos, Yaroslava is seen sitting up from the bed, saying that she doesn't remember where she is or how she got there. But from her face and voice, it is clear that she is quite drunk. In the last video, Yaroslava is already with Sergey. He approaches her, hands her a shot glass filled with an unknown liquid, and says, "Here, have another one, sunshine." She refuses. "No, let's not drink anymore, please. I won't remember anything again no more." An expert examination found the teenager mentally competent, but with certain psychological traits, including egocentricity, a reduced capacity for empathy, some demonstrative behavior, and a tendency towards self-assertion. The trial against Sergey began on March 25, 2024. 4 lawyers hired by the Menyazev family actively defended Sergey's claim that the killing was accidental. They brought in experts who tried to dispute the forensic report and presented testimony from another train driver who allegedly saw Yaroslava sitting near the tracks half an hour before the incident, appearing completely fine. Additionally, Sergey tried to evoke sympathy. "Yaroslava comes to me in my dreams. We walk together. She asks for forgiveness and says, 'Your parents will forgive you. You are not guilty.' For those 10 days that they fought to save her in the hospital, I hoped she would live, just so the whole truth could come out," Sergey said during the trial. Although the parents of the accused apologized to Yaroslava's family, they still hoped for their son's acquittal. Sergey's father, Radik, even cried during one of the hearings, claiming that his son acted out of fear. His mother simply called him a good son who had made a mistake. In his final statement, Sergey said, "The only thing I feel guilty for is not calling an ambulance." However, the court reached a different conclusion. On June 24, 2024, they found Sergey Menyazev guilty and sentenced him to nearly the maximum term, 9 years and 10 months in prison. Do you think this was an accidental killing or a cold-blooded, premeditated crime? Leave comment down below. Thank you for watching. See you in next video.